If you want to save up for a large purchase or an upcoming expense, then you may want to use a sinking fund. And I know you may be wondering, what in the world is a sinking fund? So that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Now, a sinking fund is simply an account where you put money away for future expenses. So you are strategically planning and saving for that expense over time so that when it's time to actually make that purchase, the money is available. So some examples of reasons why you would create a sinking fund would maybe be for the holidays. So for Christmas, purchasing gifts, purchasing decor. This is something that you know comes up annually. So you're putting money aside throughout the year to be able to make those purchases with cash. So the idea here is to be strategic and plan your savings for upcoming expenses that you may have or even large purchases. Another example of a sinking fund would be saving up for a car. So perhaps you want to pay for a car cash, or maybe you want to put a down payment. So you would create a sinking fund specifically for saving up for that car so that you would eventually have the money available to make that purchase when you are ready. Now, it's important to realize that a sinking fund is different from a savings account. The intentions are completely opposite. With a sinking fund, you have the intention of actually spending the money that you're putting away, whereas a savings account is meant to put money away to avoid and mitigate risk. So for instance, you will have a savings account for an emergency fund. And the idea is to not have to spend money in the emergency fund, but the money is there just in case. So there's a stark difference between having a sinking fund and actually having a savings account, because the intent of these accounts and these funds are completely different. Now, where you actually put your money for your sinking fund will vary based on what your actual savings goal is. So if you have a very long-term goal, so perhaps you are saving money up for a house or a vehicle, and it may take a little bit more time, you want to make sure you're putting your money somewhere that it's going to be able to make money from itself. So in this case, you may want to leverage something like a high yield savings account online where you're getting a higher percent yield on your money. This means each year or each month, you're able to gain interest off of the money that you're saving. You may also even check out or consider using certificates of deposit where you know you aren't going to be spending the money over the long term. So then you're able to get a certain percentage off the money that you put in those CDs. You may also even consider money market accounts, which are very similar to your high yield savings accounts, with the exception of you have the ability to actually have a card to spend on. So there are different options that you have available to put your sinking fund in. Nonetheless, you want to be very smart about it so that your money can begin to make money for you. And as you are saving, your money is actually working for you. So there is no rule of thumb when it comes to the number of sinking funds that you have. At the end of the day, this all depends on what goals you have and what you're actually trying to save up for. Now, when it comes to your savings goals, just like any other goals, I would caution against trying to do too much at one time. So trying to save for a house and also a car and also Christmas and also tuition, like so many different things at one time. So I would caution against having a bunch of sinking funds, and I would really encourage you to focus on the few things that you really want to save up for and have the money available for first before you move on to additional sinking funds. This allows your money just to go a lot further than if you were trying to divide it over maybe 10 or 20 different sinking funds. The other reason that I caution against having so many sinking funds is that if you're opening an account for each of these funds, it can get a bit confusing. Now, the great thing is with today's bank accounts, you can actually open one savings account and have multiple buckets within it. So for instance, with Ally, you can open a savings account and then you can have a bucket for car expenses, vacation, for saving up for a house, whatever those buckets are for you, you can make those buckets your actual sinking funds. So that helps with the organization and the maintenance of your sinking funds. But I would definitely caution against trying to save too much at one time. Now, I've already mentioned a few sinking funds that you may want to have. So that includes having a house fund. Even if you're not buying a house, you can definitely have a sinking fund to cover those expenses for the home that you may have, where you may cover maintenance or repairs or anything related to the upkeep of your home. You may also want to have a car fund. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're saving up to buy a car, although it could be. You can have a sinking fund specifically for car repairs and car maintenance. Some other sinking funds that you may want to consider would be like a travel fund. So if you want to have money set aside to go on vacation every year, start a sinking fund, put money aside every pay period. So when the next year comes around, you actually have money saved up for that vacation that you want to take. Some other sinking funds to consider may be some sinking funds for kids' expenses and activities. You may also want to have a sinking fund for paying off debt. So maybe you don't want to pay off debt incrementally. Maybe you want to make a large lump sum payment. If that's the case, you can set up a sinking fund just for debt payoff. So ultimately, when it comes to setting up these sinking funds, the first thing that you actually need to do is figure out, what are you saving for? What are those expenses, upcoming expenses, or financial goals that you have that you want to put money aside for? Write those down and determine what they are so that you know exactly what sinking funds you need to have in place. Once you've done that, then you can open the corresponding bank accounts, or you may do like a single bank account with multiple buckets, so that you can actually start saving the money and keeping that money separate and organized. This was something that I learned many years ago, that when you actually name the goal that you're saving for, you're more likely to actually put money towards it, because now you have a tangible goal that you're working towards. So the next thing is to determine how much you want to put in each account or each bucket. And this is going to be determined by the goal that you have and when you actually need the money. So if you are trying to save up for Christmas gifts, then you know that you will probably need access to those funds around November. So then if you start in January, you'll need to do the math, calculate how much money you'll need and how much you need to save each pay period or each month to meet your goal by that November date. So this is going to determine how much you're going to put in each account, each month, or each pay period. Here's a tip that you can actually do next, and that is to automate your savings. So if you want to ensure that you actually hit your savings goal for your sinking fund, automate your savings. So you can set this up with your employer, where you divide your paycheck to go into a separate bank account for your sinking fund, or you can do this automatically through your bank account, where you transfer money when it hits direct deposit to those sinking funds. Nonetheless, you want to have a rhythm that you have in place, a system that you have in place, and a plan where you're going to continuously be transferring that money into those sinking funds so that you can ultimately reach your goals. So if you are saving up for a large purchase or a future expense, and I definitely recommend setting up sinking funds. This is something that I leverage in my personal finances. We save up for car expenses, house expenses, vacations. All those things are sinking funds that we have set up that allow us to save for things over time. So this is a great way to just make incremental steps towards your overall savings goals that you have for your personal finances. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and check out this next video.